Hello students, this is my additional video that I've planned to show you the new way to insert your sleeves into the shirt. Originally I had said that a regular seam and overlock would be appropriate, but that's for the seam on the side. The sleeve seam should be set as a French seam. So for this video, I'm pursuing that. Of course, I've taken the liberty of pinning my sleeve in entirely. We have all of our yokes set. I've pinned it, paying particular attention to the matching of the notches. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew it a scant 1/4 of an inch. And according to the sequence of operations, depending on your fabric, and of course, what I'd like to say is it a man's shirt? Is it a woman's shirt? There's a lot of factors that would make you determine what type of seam to use for your side seam. But what we can do is we can discuss that in class. If you had up to that and finished, you would be in good shape on Monday. Now I'm just going to do my 1/4 of an inch. Now in my case, I have to do a scant 1/4 clearly, since my fabric is a little thicker and has a tendency to fray a bit. So even when I'm through, I will probably trim the edge of this stitch because I don't want those little frayed edges of my fabric showing through to the right side of my seam. Of course, in class, we will accomplish the side seam, the hem, placing the cuffs on, and the collar and the collar stand on the shirt. The only thing left to do will be the buttonholes. It's not a bad idea if we do the cuff first and the collar first. We can accomplish those buttonholes since there's probably going to be a rush on the buttonhole machines. So we can do that starting Monday. So you do know that this shirt is not due until 12 o'clock, 12 o'clock noon, May the 7th. So that will give you ample time to complete this. We can discuss, for any of you that need to hand it in earlier, that's certainly an option. And we can discuss what exact day and time would be the best to do that, unless it's the last day of class, which is this coming Wednesday. And once I complete this seam, it fits very nicely, fits really comfortably. And if it doesn't, the beauty of using linen in this case, or in the case of your shirt, probably you've used cotton, it does have a tendency to give or to be eased into the seam if it's not the exact same length. And that's always in your favor because the last thing we want in our seam are pleats or tucks or gathers, unless they're required. So clearly, once I finish the seam, in my particular case, because of the fabric that I'm using, like I said, it frays a bit. So I'm going to trim my seam before I sew the other half of the French seam. And you can see already I have some little loose ends on the edge because it's already fraying a bit just from handling this. This is what happens. Of course, clearly I'm not going to trim much off. You can see I'm hardly trimming anything. Particularly when I have another seam, and in this case the yoke seam has 4 layers, which makes it a little thicker. That's a definite must to trim. Some of you may not have this problem because you're using cotton and it doesn't fray as much. That would absolutely be a bonus. The other thing I want to mention is as you're sewing, be very careful if in fact you've clipped your notch a little deeper than it should be. While you're sewing this seam, I'm sorry to say this, but you're going to have to sew the seam just a little larger so that that clip doesn't turn into a fray on the right side of the shirt. One of mine looked a little close, so I think I'm going to do that just to be on the safe side. Mine is actually fraying, that's the problem. See, so I have my two notches here and they look a little close to the seam, so I'm going to proceed to just go maybe a 1/16 of an inch larger. Not by very much. Trim that. Now in my case, because this fabric is, in addition to it being linen and it fraying, it's a little thicker than some of your cottons. So I'm going to press this seam. Make it a little simpler to sew. Doesn't matter which direction I press it in as long as I'm consistent with the direction. Okay, so I think I've covered all my bases in order to get the seam as flat and as narrow as is possible. No pinning necessary on this. Pressing it surely makes a world of difference when it's time to sew. It's so much easier to turn, get it down that seam line. And now on the other side of this seam, I'm going to do that generous 1/4 of an inch. Now in this case, I'm going to go especially slow, just because it is a curved seam, and I do want it to be accurate in terms of the way it looks when it's finished. I don't want it to be pulled in one direction or the other, which makes the seam not look professional. So I'm taking my time. At this point now you have a lot of shirt to handle, so it becomes a little bit cumbersome here because of all the bulk that you're trying to handle under this needle. It's just a little more difficult, if you want to call it that, than obviously 2 straight pieces of fabric would be, because we have a curve that's involved now. So in this case, I'm going to ease this a bit because of that curve. Always. Now I failed to do that before this, but I'm going to double check what I've got underneath here. And I did catch, I thought it felt a little thick. I did catch some of the fabric. Oh no, I didn't. It's pretty flat, so I'm good. But I want to do that always. Double check what's going on underneath. The last thing you want to do is have a big pleat. Especially that when you're doing that as an overlock, what happens? you can have the potential to cut the fabric, and then it's really not anything that can be repaired other than to put some form of a dart in it, but then it ruins the lines of the shirt. So that is my French seam that I've done for my sleeve seam. It's a little bit larger than a quarter, which is good, but it's consistent and it's a beautiful finish. It's particularly good if you've done it a men's shirt. Sometimes women's shirts, not so necessary, but like I said, that's for your side seam. Everyone is responsible to do a French seam on the armhole. Then we will take it under advisement according to the fabric and whether it's a man's or a woman's shirt, whether or not we're going to do a French seam for the side seam, whether we're going to stitch it and overlock it, or if you want to, since like in this particular case, my shirt has an edge and foot stitch on all the seams. I only did flaps because mine's a woman's shirt, and all the details I'm doing an edge and foot stitch. So my choice might be on that side seam to do the mock flat felt, which is a French seam that's going to face the outside of the shirt, and we stitch down the seam so that it looks like it's a flat felt seam. I think it might be appropriate because I have those double rows of stitching, but a lot of this depends on your shirt, your fabric, whether it's men's or women's, what you've done to the shirt so far. So that's going to be what we're going to talk about on Monday. We're going to complete all the other operations. My shirt has my sleeve set in. I'm up to the under the side seam rather, and like I said, then on Monday and surely by Wednesday we're going to complete the shirt. And at that point we'll discuss when, in fact, if you're behind, don't worry about it because the shirt officially is not due until the 7th at noon. So we'll talk about that in class. I hope you have a nice weekend and happy sewing and good luck with your shirt. Thank you.